Hey everyone, we are back in Control, Remedy's amazing new exploration shooter game. And we started looking at this one when it came out, and as much as we loved the game, it was clear that the further you progressed into it on the consoles, the more inconsistent performance got. To the point where, well, some of the performance figures that we were pulling up here were just almost borderline unplayable in those areas. And the man who actually did that analysis, John Linneman, joins me to discuss the new patch.
Yes, hi Rich. You've been spearheading these operations to test this bad boy out and get your head around the game. I think, between us, we have a pretty good idea of how things have changed in the world of Control.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's actually been a really worthwhile exercise because I haven't played the game at all before the patch came out. So you had the day one experience.
That's right.
And I've got the experience of playing the game with the September patch in place. So yeah, very different perceptions, I think, of how well the game sort of holds up. Your internet's very dodgy at the moment, so I don't think you've been able to experience the new version. Is that right?
Yeah, the internet is currently down at home, and I'm relying on LTE from my phone, which, sometimes that's what you have to do. So I haven't checked out the new patch, but I guess the first thing we should probably do is just sort of refresh people on how it was.
Yeah.
Just to understand why this patch makes a difference.
Yeah, so at the moment we've only got the PlayStation version available, the Xbox patch, and indeed a further PC patch coming in a few days, I believe. But I'd say that there's some interesting developments that really do improve the game, to the point where, yes, let's go back to your original analysis and look at each of the versions in turn. Top of the pile, Xbox One X, which, not really that surprising, had the highest resolution, had the highest frame rate, highest sustained frame rate, the fewest drops. So this was the version that was in pole position. We can't test the patch version of that. And I guess on the base console side of things, Xbox One S actually outscored the base PlayStation 4, lower resolution but better sustained performance.
Yeah.
Why don't you pick up the story with the PlayStation versions there?
Yeah, so the PS4 Pro version was also already pretty good overall, and yeah, it does run at a lower resolution than Xbox One X, but there were scenes that I tested where even on the Pro, there was some pretty serious drops in performance, especially that atrium scene.
Right.
We were getting some low 20s, I guess, and maybe even a little bit lower than that. But either way, it was pretty severe, hurt the playability of the game, and yeah, not great. But it was the base PS4 that was most surprising, in that we got dips all the way down to around 10 frames per second at points. The whole thing basically reached the point where I would consider those certain battles to be unplayable. And even just during normal combat and traversal, you're still getting drops. And of course, on all versions, pulling up the map also kind of dips the frame rate a little bit. Like, it just wasn't consistent, especially on the base PS4. And some people have wondered about this, and I do have to wonder if the fact that they spent so much time working on Xbox One for Quantum Break, if that has had some sort of impact on development in a way that, the Xbox base version turned out a little better than you might have expected in that sense. Not that it ran well anyways, but
Yeah, I mean, well, I can talk about my experiences with the game on both PlayStation units, where I basically played through the first 3 chapters to replicate your trouble spots to see what was going on there. Going back to your initial video, I was shocked at how bad it was, because I think the takeaway here is that, especially on the PS4 Pro, Control is massively improved in those problem areas. And to be fair, before we went live with our video, you actually contacted Remedy, and just to give them a heads up, it was a couple of days before we went live with our content, I believe.
Yep.
Just to say, right, this is what we found, just so there's no nasty surprises when we go live. And yeah, the good news is that in all of those problem areas you identified, there are big improvements. So in the atrium section, the sort of staircase battle that you have there, it's a huge improvement, I'd say. Overall, it's far more sustained in performance terms, and it does still drop. I don't think Remedy is saying in their patch notes that things have been completely improved and that it's fixed. They've just said that there are performance improvements, and I would say that this is not too bad now. There are still areas where it can really drop hard, down to 20 frames per second. That's not good, but It's more about consistency, I think. You would have those sustained drops, and now it's much better. So this is good news. The atrium section, which was the big sort of stress test, I won't say it's fixed because it isn't, but it's hugely improved, and I actually had a really great time with this version on the Pro, to the point where I'm kind of now thinking, if this improvement is mapped over to the Xbox One X based on your initial analysis, that should be really in a very, very good place. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that patch. I'm not sure we'll have the resources to do a full video on it, but we will update you on that just to give you the lie of the land of how this optimization has improved the Xbox versions.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is I'd say pretty promising. There are issues, and there are big frame time spikes to the point where I've had to expand the frame time chart here to 150 milliseconds to contain them all, and that's not good. But I think the takeaway is that now at least those drops are quite fleeting, whereas before they were a lot more sustained.
Right, that actually sounds pretty good then.
Yeah.
I still found it to be playable enough anyways, and this sounds quite good now, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
What about the base PS4 then?
So the base unit is a little trickier to get a handle on. Now, I think it's fair to say that compared to the Pro, it's a lot less stable, and that is a bit of a concern when it comes to testing those problem areas. Now, the first time I actually tackled the atrium, yeah, as you can see, the results are kind of interesting here in that, well, it looks like, I won't say it's perfect, but it's certainly much closer to a cleaner bill of health there, and you think to yourself that Remedy's optimization push has really paid off here. So I went back to your original video to make sure that I was actually testing the exact same content, and I thought to myself that maybe you'd kind of herded all of the enemies into that one area in order to really stress performance there. I don't think you did do that actually, but I thought I'd try it regardless. And this is what happened. So yes, we aren't seeing those continuous drops to really low frame rates that you saw, but you can still make performance tank in Control. And this game is so dynamic that I'm sure the user can make that happen as well. But earlier on I did try it across several runs of that area and didn't really have too many problems aside from like drops to the high 20s. But yeah, I've proved that you can still tank performance, but it's still an improvement over what we saw before. In Remedy's patch notes, they're talking about systems level optimization and content optimization. So this kind of suggests that they've gone into the trouble areas and attacked them on two fronts. They've looked at what's causing performance issues at a systemic level and improved that. But there's the hint that they may have adjusted the content ever so slightly just to make it run better, which I think is a really good way to address the issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I will say is that the Pro is far more sustained at 30 FPS throughout most of the content, whereas the base PlayStation 4 drops a lot more often. It's not sustained drops, but they are there, and it kind of gives the sense that the game is almost sort of unpolished, just because of the frequency of the drops, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a kind of weird one here, and I do wonder what's going on there, because I actually ran the whole of the first 2 and a bit chapters through our tools, which we can do in real time now as we play. The outlook is pretty good overall, but when you get those frame rate drops, it does hit hard, and I think it's to the point where the consistency of the game, it kind of conditions you to accept a decent frame rate, do you know what I mean? And so when it does drop, it's really, really noticeable, and I hope they can do more with that.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of looking at a per instance level of what's going on here when we get one of those kind of hitches. And it does seem to be physics related.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think the game offers some of the most robust physics interactions that we've ever seen in a console shooter. To be honest, like, so many objects can be destroyed and messed with and sort of jostled around realistically, and I feel like in this current state, that's just the price you have to pay. If you want all those physics, this kind of stuff doesn't come cheap, especially on the CPU side. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've got a massive explosion here going on in the power plant section, which was one of your hotspots from the original review. The Pro was absolutely fine for the most part there. This is one example of the base unit really tanking pretty badly. The frame time graph is a bit of a mess, anything up to 100 milliseconds, from 16 to 100 milliseconds in fact, so it really does emphasize the lack of consistency there. I don't know, it kind of says to me that it's a CPU issue, and that would make sense because the base PS4 has the weakest CPU out of all of the current gen consoles. But on the other hand, when you look at the nature of the explosion going on here, I mean, if we slow it down and look at it at a per frame level, these explosions are awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised they do cause some issues.
I'm sure it's a combination of things, CPU, maybe memory bandwidth, just, there's a lot happening there that's just going to push these systems a little bit too far. And it's cool that it's there, but maybe it needed to be toned down a bit on the base systems.
Yeah, I think the takeaway that we should have from the patch, though, just generally, is that those sort of sustained mid-teen issues, I think it was about 3 hours of gaming, performance analysis on every single frame that I experienced, there wasn't anything like as sustained a drop as what you experienced. So in this respect, I do think that the game is in much, much better shape now.
That's great.
To the point where I can't say it's unplayable, but what I can say is that there's just a sense on the base PS4 especially that it's just a bit unpolished, and could do with another round of optimization to get it into shape.
Yeah.
And I was kind of surprised. I mean, you were talking about how Remedy have obviously worked before only on the Xbox One in console terms for this generation, and I was kind of surprised to see that the PS4 version was having issues because that's the version that you can't really afford to get wrong. It's the one with by far the biggest install base, so that would be my target platform. So it's surprising that it shipped in that state. But what I will say is that there can still be issues, as you can see here, but I think the point is that the hit to performance isn't as sustained as it was on the day one code. Okay, look, let's round this one up. Control patch, it's out now on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One will be imminent as an upcoming PC September patch with gameplay improvements and whatnot as well. I'd say that on the console side of things, there's still work to do, but the potential here for the Xbox version, based on the optimizations we've seen here, is pretty impressive, so I'm going to be looking forward to seeing that. But we're going to round that off for now. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Ring the bell, of course, for instant notifications whenever we post a new Digital Foundry video. Well, thanks for joining me on this one, John.
Of course.
Anyway, that's all from us for now. Thanks for watching.